When I arrived at seminary some 5-6 years ago, one of the first things that I learned was that the chapel that was that belonged to the seminary had burned down about in 2010. This chapel was over 150 years old, and because of an accident, it was burned down. All that was left was a piece of one wall and the stained glass windows, all the very precious gifts that the community had received for worship, the beautiful linen, all the things that make service and enriches our time in a place of worship was gone. And immediately, the Virginia Theological Seminary started a capital campaign to raise $13 million to build the new chapel on that hill. It sits on a beautiful campus that is, sort of uphill, and on the topmost part was where the chapel was. And by the time I graduated, we were sitting in this magnificent new edifice and becoming a community that worshipped in a place that spoke of the beauty of craftsmen, the skills that people bring to make a house of worship something that is beautiful for us who come together and to reflect something of God's glory. For many, many religions, the house of worship is an important place because not only is it a time and a place for the community to come together, but it also in some way raises your worship upwards towards God. This morning we heard in the gospel about Jesus in the temple in Jerusalem. That too was a holy hill. Where the temple in Jerusalem stood was a place where for hundreds of years the Jewish people would come, the priests would be there, the prophets spoke to God, God came to meet them at that place. It was not just a place of worship, it was, as the Jewish people believed, the home, the house of God. Even though God was everywhere, this was where the God of Israel dwelt. The people and God met in this place. And every important festival, the Passover, whatever it was, Jews from all over the area outside the Mediterranean, from wherever they had moved, if they were able to, they came to worship at the temple. Just like the Church of the Emmanuel at VTS, this temple in Jesus' time was not the first temple. We're going to do a little bit of history here. Because King David, wanted to build a temple for his God. He said, how can I live in this magnificent palace and the God who I worship is in a tabernacle? He wanted to build something that sort of showed how wonderful God was to maybe the neighbors who were not worshiping the one God. But God said no to David, but you can start gathering the materials for the temple, but your son Solomon will build it. And so Solomon built the temple of God. But by the time of the exile, that temple was destroyed. And when the people came back home, they started to build a new temple on that same place, that same holy hill. And in Jesus' time, Herod had wanted to make it even more magnificent. And so he had started this rebuilding of the temple. And when Jesus now is there worshiping, This temple has been around for 46 years, and it still was not done. It would not be done for another maybe 3 decades. But it was the place for the community to come together. And God had told the people, they understood that this was a place where you bring your offerings. And for the people, those offerings included the ones that were going to be sacrificed there at the temple. So you brought your first fruits, the best of your sheep, the best of whatever animal you herded. But if you're coming from afar and walking, the best might not be in good shape when you get to the temple. And so, according to Deuteronomy, you could sell your sheep or your goat or your cattle. You could sell them in your own town and then bring the money to the temple and buy one of the whatever it was that you were coming to offer to God. So the marketplace that was happening at the temple was in service of the people who needed to worship the way that they understood offerings were supposed to be given to God. But you can imagine how corrupt that soon became. Things were expensive, more expensive than they should be. The money changers needed to be there because you could not bring money with the emperor's image stamped on it as offering into the temple. So you had to have a bank system to trade the coins that you brought from other places to get the temple coins. They made profit from that as well. So Jesus does see in his Father's house things happening that was not what God wanted. This was not God's intention. But the interesting thing about this story of Jesus overturning the tables and driving out the animals in the temple, in John's gospel, it takes place almost at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. In the other Gospels, it comes after Palm Sunday, when Jesus has entered Jerusalem. But John is, I think, wants us not to spend so much time on what Jesus did, whether it's righteous anger, whether it's the corruption of the place of worship. I think John wants us to pay attention to what Jesus said. That if you destroy this temple, it will be raised in 3 days. That Jesus has shifted our ideas of a temple being something built out of wood and bricks and other construction material to his body. Jesus now is the temple where God dwells. You know, John, remember, starts his gospel by saying the Word became flesh. God took on a human body and dwelt among us. And this Lent, as we follow that body to the cross, to the tomb, we become better able to understand how God dwells within. And perhaps we can remember too that our bodies are the temple of God. God dwells in our bodies. You know, we have, because of sometimes religious teaching, sometimes it's the world, we think of our bodies as sort of not good. You know, we're always trying to fix something We lose weight, we do a nose job, we change the color of our hair, we tweak the body doing all kinds of things because maybe we don't truly understand what a precious gift this body is. It is the temple of God. And God needs this body that you carry and that I carry. Because when Jesus is resurrected and ascended and goes back to his Father, somebody has to continue the work. Somebody has to stretch out the arm to the person who is in need. Somebody has to look out and see who is the outsider in the community. Somebody has to proclaim the good news that God is alive and that God loves each and every one. If you see yourself as that temple, as that body, then you must become the missionary, the person who brings good news to others. Maybe this Lent is a time to think about how we can better use this body that is the temple of God. How can we better serve the one who became one of us to show us the worth that we have as humans in the sight of God? And may we, as bodies, the home where God dwells, may we bring the good news to those we meet. Amen.
Amen.